Good afternoon, and welcome to today's City Club Forum. I'm Bill Welsh, a member of the Board of Directors of the City Club Forum Foundation. Thank you for joining us for this special and timely program with Ohio Secretary of State Jennifer Brunner. This election season, Ohio is once again at the center of the nation's attention. We are not only a battleground state, where the presidential election is very close, we are also the center of attention with respect to how fairly and accurately we will conduct the election. The difficulties in recent elections have been well documented, even resulting in the movie Stealing America, Vote by Vote. Unfortunately, Ohio, whether because of glitches or outright fraud, was a prime example of those problems, leading many to have a crisis of confidence in our election system. Upon taking office, Secretary Brunner immediately began to address these difficulties, stating her number one goal is to restore trust to Ohio elections and ensure citizens have faith that Ohio elections are free, fair, open, and honest. The difficulties of restoring trust have been compounded by the technical challenges as the Secretary, along with many local boards of elections, have had to determine how best to comply with new laws and new systems, whether to have punch card ballots or electronic systems, whether or not to require paper trails. In less than 4 weeks, the results of this hard work will be put to the test. Jennifer Brunner is Ohio's first woman to serve as Secretary of State, and her background has made her well qualified for the office to which Ohio voters elected her in November 2006. She previously served in the office of Secretary of State under Sherrod Brown as legislative counsel and has 13 years of election law private practice experience. She was a Franklin County Common Pleas Court judge and a member of the Franklin County Board of Elections. Some of her earlier experience included work as a special prosecutor for election fraud. Secretary Brunner received a BA in Sociology Gerontology, cum laude, from Miami University, Oxford, and her law degree with honors from Capital University. She and her husband, Rick, also an attorney, have 3 adult children and live in Columbus. In 2008, Secretary Brunner was one of 3 recipients of the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award, presented annually by the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation to public servants who have made courageous decisions of conscience without regard for the personal or professional consequences. The award is recognition of Brunner's leadership in challenging the reliability of Ohio's electronic voting systems in a bid to ensure the integrity of every citizen's vote. The New York Times also thinks Secretary Brunner is doing a good job. In an editorial in this past Sunday's Times on foreclosures and the right to vote, the Times wrote, quote, "Jennifer Brunner, Ohio Secretary of State, is doing a good job." Please join me in a warm City Club welcome for Ohio Secretary of State, Jennifer Brunner.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for taking your time on this rainy day to be here, and we certainly hope the weather will not be like this 27 days from now. We are fully expecting this fall an 80% turnout of our registered voters, and looking at the latest statistics that I have from Cuyahoga County, you are now, in terms of total registered voters, just at about 1.1 million registered voters, and that could swell a bit more since the 6th was the last day of registration, and there is a period of time where some of the agencies who do registration do have time to turn those over. I know between 5 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night on Monday, the 6th, which was the close of registration, our office alone took in 1,500 forms, not counting what Franklin County down the street was taking in from the county. The election system, I think, as we all know, has been the subject of a lot of controversy and debate, and it has changed drastically in the last few years, and especially with the advent of the Help America Vote Act. I think, interestingly enough, when I was counting up on my fingers how many months I had been in office, and it's 21 months as of today. So coming into this office, we knew that we had quite a challenge to deal with the perceptions, some of the realities, but the changes and the reforms that we wanted to see so that we could put Ohio on the map as a state that wasn't a pariah for the rest of the country from an election standpoint, but was one where we would return to our reputation of being progressive, a diverse state, one that well represents the people of this country. So our primary election was our first test in that challenge, and we did run what we believe was a very successful primary with 46% turnout, and of those 46% who turned out, 500,000 of them voted absentee. So I'll get into that subject in just a little bit, but what I want to talk with you about is the themes that we've been focusing on in getting ready for this election. And we've been focusing on preparation, also partnership with our boards of elections, and partnership with community partners as well. And we think all of that together is going to lead to a successful November election. And for me, successful means that I don't really care who wins. I just want the election to be a good election where the voters feel good about the process and they feel as if their vote counted and their vote in fact does count. All 88 county boards of elections are really diligently preparing for this election. And I've been visiting boards of elections in rural areas, in larger areas, and I wish that everyday citizens could walk into a board of elections, into the back of the operations, and see the volume of what's being handled. In Cuyahoga County alone, it's mind-boggling when you think about what Jane Platten and Pat McDonald and the 4 board members have to deal with, and I do see some former members of the Board of Elections and former director here today as well. But imagine having to plan for a primary election in about half of the county on October 14th, where you need 645 presiding judges. At the same time, you're still planning for the presidential general election on November 4th, where you need 1,436 presiding judges, and that's just the one out of the at least 4 poll workers that you have per precinct. And in addition, they're hiring judges, voter assistance judges. They're looking for high school students, and I see a lot of you here today. Polling location coordinators, rovers, and when you combine all of that, they're looking just for November 4th alone, 6,309 people to be out in the polling places helping them run the election. And these are essentially citizen volunteers who get paid a little something to do the work, but that's what makes our democracy so extraordinary, that we do have a citizen-run election. So what we've done in collaborating with the boards of elections has been to focus on election security, voter confidence, and voting operations. Now, by election security, you heard Bill talk a little bit about a voting machine study that we did. And even though it didn't propel the state legislature to provide us money to move the entire state to paper-based systems, what it did is it taught us where we had some holes in our procedures and things that we could do so that if there were risks that we couldn't change by changing our systems, that we would be in a position to detect risks and be able to recover from those if there were a problem. So we gathered together a bipartisan working group of election officials, 6 Republicans, 6 Democrats, and we developed best practices for security, all the way from what's the best security to have at the Board of Elections. And so even when I go to a Board of Elections and I sign in just like anybody else would before I go back behind that counter. We also looked at the transport of voting machines and memory cards and ballots. How are we going to safely do that so that it will be available to the poll workers and to voters on Election Day? What kind of security do we need in the polling place? And what about getting everything back to the Board of Elections, most specifically ballots or memory cards or both, and poll books and the records that you need to reconcile? And then what are the minimum security settings that you need for your servers? And in this day and age, after we've left the punch card era, our servers really look like your Dell server that you would have underneath your desk. And that server does ballot layout as well as tabulation election night. And so it's very critical that we have good security practices for those.